everybody. This is Pastor Martin, and tonight is Wednesday when we talk ministry, and we're going to get started in just a moment. So please come on in tonight as we're looking forward to sharing with you tonight, and I know it's going to be a blessing to you. So please come in, share it with someone, and we will get started momentarily here. We'll be starting in just a moment, and we're looking forward again to tonight's live. Well, hey, everybody. Hey. I'm glad you've joined us tonight for our live session. And it is Wednesday night where we talk ministry. And I know it's going to bless you. I know it's going to be a blessing to you tonight as we're getting started. I want you to please share this with someone. I believe tonight's subject is going to be very informative. It's going to help you and it's going to bless you. And so please come in. I'm going to do a few quick maintenance things real quick like I do every week. And once we get those out of the way, we're going to get started and we won't be long. We promise not to be long with this tonight. We're going to get started and get going here in just a moment. And let's see. Just a moment, we'll get started. And I know it's going to bless you as we get started tonight. All right, here we go. Thank you for joining me. And let me say to you tonight, I want to appreciate each and every one of you that I've heard from. Many of you I've heard from, and you shared with me about the ministry and what the blessing this has been to you. And so I'm so grateful to God for you tonight being with us and sharing with us on tonight. So as we get started tonight in the lesson and in what we're going to be sharing tonight, we want you again to of course, please share this with somebody. Please let somebody know about it, and there will be a blessing to them in ministry also. Let me, first of all, start by saying thank you for so many of you that have reached out to me, so many of you that I've heard from, so many of you that have contacted me about what we're doing here on Wednesday nights and about ministry. I really appreciate you for reaching out. I really appreciate you for your supporting what we're doing here. This, what we do on Wednesday nights, we try to do it to help ministers and those that are getting started, those that are in ministry that need encouragement, those that know you're called to ministry, and sometimes things are not always like you want them to be. But we are here to encourage you and to just tell you to keep pressing and keep moving. And I know it's going to bless you. And so tonight, I want to share with you tonight. I want to, first of all, give a shout out to Brother Jay Richardson from Bristol, Tennessee, that sent something to me today. I hope you can see it. It's called Crossfire. It's a study Bible. He sent to me and some other materials, said that this is for your entertainment. He said, I enjoy what you're doing, enjoy the ministry. One of my Caucasian brothers, thank you so much for sending this to me. And I'm definitely going to take advantage of it and use it. And I'm just grateful that he thought enough to send something to me in the mail. He said, I certainly enjoy what you're doing and enjoy the ministry. And so I wanted to send something to you. Let me give shouts out to those of you that are watching, those of you that are looking. I see those that are watching from Phoenix, those that are watching from Michigan and different places, those that watch, and they contact me and say, we thank you for the ministry. I've had some that say we just sort of sit down as a family and watch you on Wednesdays, and I'm grateful for that. Tonight, let me get started, and I promise not to be long. I want to just share with you a little bit tonight. And as you can see, the subject says, what's next? What's next? What's next? What do I do next? What's now? What is the next thing that I need to do? Because it did not turn out like I thought it would. I planned some things and I thought that I was doing what I was going to do, but it did not turn out the way that I thought it was going to turn out. And so my question now is what's next. And I think all of us, whether we will admit it or not, all of us have had a what is next moment. What do we do now? What is the next move for my life, for family, for the church, for the ministry? What do I do next? What is the next thing that I need to do? Because sometimes you put a lot of energy into things, and you say to yourself, now what is next? What do I do next? What is the next thing that I need to do? And I just want to share with you tonight about what's next, and share with you about some things that I believe will bless you, some things I believe will encourage you on tonight, and cause you to be able to go just a little bit further. Hey, Winston, and see, bless you, some things that will encourage you to keep going. What's next? Have you ever had a what is next moment? What now? What do I do? And I'm talking about in ministry, even in your family life, even in some things on the job. You say to yourself, Lord, okay, look like I've come to wit's end, look like I've reached the end of this road, this rope. What do I do next? What is the next thing that I need to do? What is the next thing? Well, I want to share with you 5 things real quickly that I believe that will bless you, 5 things that I believe will help you to know what is next and the next thing you need to do. So I want you to understand, first of all, what's next? What do I do? I tried it. I put my effort into it, but it did not turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. And we're going to deal with that in a little more in-depthness. But I want to say to you, number one, the first thing you need to do when you get to a what is next moment or what now moment is you need to go back and ask God, what do I do from here? Because sometimes there are 2 things could have happened, and one of them we'll deal with in depth in a few minutes. But one of the things that could have happened to us is we could have thought it was the plan of God, and it wasn't really his plan for us. Did you not know that? I know we don't believe it, but the Bible says in one occasion, even concerning the children of Israel, that God gave them their own desires. Sometimes God will allow us because we want to do it. He won't stop us. He'll let us do what we think we want to do. And sometimes when we think it's something God, sometimes it's not necessarily God. Hey, Brother Richardson, thank you for the book and the information you sent me. Sometimes we think it's God, but it's not God. Sometimes we believe that it is God that has told us to do something, and it is not necessarily God. And so we have to go back and ask God, God, did I miss you, or was that something else that I needed to do? Did I understand what you told me to do? Because sometimes it can be just a thing of not knowing that it was the plan of God or was not his plan at all. And I know that that's something most of us, we don't want to hear, but it is the true fact. Sometimes we can think it's God and it's not necessarily God. And so we have to go back to God and ask God, God, what is it that you really want me to do? Because sometimes, let's be honest, we do things not because it's so much the will of God, but sometimes we do things to impress others around us and others that are near, so we can make them to think that we've got something going on. But I would rather ask and get God's direction than try to impress those around me. And so you've got to go back. When you have a what is next moment, what do I do now? Sometimes you just got to go back to God and just humble ourselves and say, God, now what do you want me to do now? Now, I've had an occasion where that has happened to me several times, where I just thought something was the Lord and I was doing it. And sometimes it just didn't work out. It wasn't, it didn't come out the way I thought it was going to. With all my planning and all the stuff that I did, it just didn't turn out. And what I had to do is recognize that, God, I need to go back. And sometimes you went back, and then when you really begin to seek God, then he gave you a different plan. Sometimes he didn't even move you to a different place. He just gave you his plan. And when you did what he said do, then you found out that things worked out a little bit better, simply because you were obeying God. So you have to really go back to God and ask God, what's next? It didn't turn out the way I thought it would. What is the next thing I need to do? Sometimes, number 2, you need to ask yourself, what is the reason that we think it didn't work? What's the reason? What's the reason that we think it didn't work? Why are we saying that it didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to? Was it because we had greater expectations, or was it because we were looking at something else and measuring it by something else? And we're going to talk about that a little more in a minute. But what is the reason we think it didn't work? Sometimes things have worked, but we don't believe they work because we're looking at other things. We're looking at other things to measure them by. We're looking at other things to see if they work. But you've got to understand, if it is the plan of God, if it's something God gave you, and then it is executed and things happen, just because it didn't turn out the way in your mind you thought it was going to turn out, does not mean that it was not God or it did not work. A lot of times we are consumed in this day of social media with keeping up with everybody else. We're consumed in this day of social media with doing it the way everybody else is doing it. And so sometimes we actually miss God altogether because we believe that I'm going to do it the way God, the way other people are doing it, and we actually miss God. Everybody's plan that they have or everything that they're doing is not for us to do. So you have to really take a inventory, really do a deep search in your heart, in your spirit, and ask yourself, what is the reason that I believe? What is the reason that I think this is not working? What is the reason that I said this is not working? Or did it really work? It worked, but I didn't look for it. It didn't do what I thought it should have done because of what I was looking at with others. So how is this working? What is going on with this? And you have to ask yourself, and you have to find out, have you really asked yourself about that, and to find out if it's working. Number three, you've got to ask yourself, now this is a very important one that you have to ask yourself, because if you don't ask yourself this one, then you're going to always be stuck at what's next. You're always going to be thinking of something should happen a certain way and it don't. Because you got to ask yourselves, was my motives right in the first place? Was I really doing this to honor God, or was I doing this to be glorified or get honor, or let my flesh get glory, or to let people know who I am, what I can do? And so if your motives are wrong in the first place, then it's never going to work. You're always going to be at a what's next, because your motives were wrong. We got to always keep our motives right. We've got to do things with the right motives, the right intentions in mind. We cannot continue to say, well, I'm going to do it this way. No, our motives have got to be right in whatever we're doing. We must have the right motives in ministry. And so what happens, a lot of times we come to what next from California, God bless you. We come to what's next, and we wonder what in the world is going on, because our motives were wrong in the first place. When we put things together, we didn't have the right motives. We said we were helping people, but were we really helping them? Our motives, our intentions were wrong. We wanted a following. We wanted other stuff. So we got to check our motives at the door to find out, God, am I really doing this that you can be glorified? Am I really doing this that you can get glory? Or am I doing this so I can get accolades, so I can get pats on the back, so I can be the one that people be like, oh, look at Martin, look at what he's doing. Sometimes our motives are completely wrong. And sometimes God cannot get glory because of our motives and the way we do things with the wrong intentions. Now, I know that that's not something that we like to hear, but it's something that we have to be honest about, and keeping the right motives in what we're doing. A lot of times, our motives are just somewhere in the left. And as preachers, I understand this. As preachers, there are certain things we do as preachers, and there's a saying that they usually say a lot in the church, and that saying is, I killed him. I killed the house, or I dumped the house. And man, he killed the house. And all of us probably have said that. But when you really think about it, is that the right motives for what we're doing? Is to just kill the house, get them emotional, or were we really ministering to minister to people Or was it so our peers could say to us, you did, oh man, you wrecked the house? Our motives, we got to check our motives. Our motives must be checked if we're going to do these things, because if you don't, you'll come back to a what's next moment. I never forget a pastor friend of mine. Um, the Lord told him to pray for someone that was in a wheelchair. And he prayed for them. And when he prayed for them, he said, the Lord said that he was going to heal this person. They're going to get out the wheelchair. And he was like, oh my God, I'm going to pray and I know God's going to do it. And he prayed for them and they did not get out of the wheelchair, did not get up. And he said that he went home and he was angry with God all night. He said, God, I know you told me that that person was going to get out the wheelchair. And you had me praying for them in front of all these people. And I prayed and I prayed and you didn't let them get out the wheelchair. And he was really angry with God. But when he got to church the next night in the revival, people were dancing and praising God. And he was wondering why people are so excited about church and everything. And what he found out was the person he prayed for the night before, God had healed them during the night. They got out of the wheelchair, they started walking, and they came into that service walking, and the people broke out in praise. And he said, Lord, why you do that? The Lord said, because if I would have let that happen in front of people, you wanted to steal glory. You wanted to steal honor from me. So what I thought I would do is I would let you pray. When you prayed, they were healed. But I would let you pray and then let them come back healed so you wouldn't be able to steal any glory and get any credit for it. Sometimes God has us to check our motives because we have the wrong motives in what we are doing. Number 4, and I'm going through these quickly tonight. Number 4, you've got to ask yourself, what were you measuring your success by? A lot of times we have measured our ministries and things by. This is why we come to those what's next, because we measure things by other people's things. And you can't always measure them. I often say to you that my grandmother was a seamstress. My mother sewed. And they did it the old-fashioned way, of course. They would go and buy patterns. And I remember when she would sometimes have me to cut the pattern out, they had different sizes even in the pattern. And even though she had bought the pattern, they had different sizes on the front. And as she said, to cut the pattern, she said, cut this one right here. And it left a lot of excess on the others, but she was cutting it for a particular person or a particular size. So she was not cutting it just for one dress fits all, like some of the stuff they got today, everything fits all. No, she cut it for the mere fact that it was specifically for somebody else. And I want to tell you that sometimes God has something for you. And what we come to the what next moment and we begin to think well, it didn't work is because we're trying to measure everything by somebody else's pattern or their cloth. We're measuring by what they cut out, by what they do. And sometimes God has something specifically for you. And what we don't is we don't follow him. We go to following what other people say we should do. And sometimes when it don't work, then we get upset with God. We get disappointed, and we get disappointed for the fact that we should have just obeyed God and did what he told us to do and not went through any changes about that. So you've got to stop measuring what other people are doing and measuring your success by other people. I never forget years ago, I was doing some teaching about marriage and some teaching about doing some things concerning keeping your checkbook and everything, because for many, many years in my house, my wife, she hasn't had to work. I've taken care of the house. I pay the bills, all of those things. I balance the checkbook. I do all of that. And I don't have no problem. I love doing that. But I never forget one of my elders, he's deceased now. I was preaching that one day and he came to me after church. He said, Pastor, can I talk to you? And I said, yeah. He said, now, Pastor, I love you. I love your teaching. I just think you're an awesome man of God. He said, but I need you to just listen at me for a moment. I said, all right, what is it? He said, I want you to know that what works in your house may not work in my house. He said, now, I'm going to take some of the stuff you say because it's good. He said, but now some stuff just may not work in my house. He said, I may not can let my wife handle the checkbook, or she may not can let me handle the checkbook. And so I understood what he was saying. And so what I'm saying to you is stop measuring your ministry. Stop measuring what you do by others and thinking, well, I had this event and, I only had 50 people. I had this event and I only had, 100 people, but they had an event and 1,000 showed up. Well, if 100 showed up for your event, those were the 100 that God wanted to hear what you had to say. Those were the 100 that were supposed to be at your event. And those were the 100 that were going to get from your event and your ministry what they're supposed to get. I want you to get that. I want you to always remember that. Whoever showed up, God wanted them there. Whoever is not there, maybe they were not supposed to be there. So whoever was there, allow yourself not to get discouraged, not to have that what's next. Now, what did I do? It didn't turn out the way. Minister to those that are there and watch God bless you, because sometimes God just wants to see if you'll be faithful over the few before he puts you the rule over many. All right. Number 5, and we're moving. Sometimes you have to try again when you got a what's next moment. What's now? You got to try again. Sometimes you can't give up. Sometimes we give up on that first try and we say, I'm not going to try it again. I'm not going to do it again. Sometimes you have to do it again, because sometimes when you start thinking about it and looking at it and praying about it, then you'll start understanding, okay, the reason I've got to try this again, the reason I need to do this again is let me find out if it was the timing of God. You see, because a lot of times things that God has given you, it's going to work, but you just got to do it in this right timing. Timing is so important with God and with doing the things of God and with obeying God. Timing means a lot. So you have to be able to say, I've got to move in the timing of God. You can't move out of God's timing and expect everything to work or to max out or to do the things you need to do. You have to move with the timing of God. God has a timing for us. God has a time. That's why when he talked to Abraham and Sarah, he said, at the time appointed. At the time appointed. There's going to be an appointed time that something's going to happen. You have to understand the reason we're going through the frustration and changes we're going through is because we have not figured out the timing of God. At the time appointed. When God wants you to do something, he'll give you a time to do it. He'll move you in the right time. And when you move in the timing of God, things that you could not control, things that you would never have done, it just happens for you because it's the timing of God. I remember when I was appointed to the church that I pastor, it was a timing thing. I remember about maybe a month before I was appointed to this church. I never forget, there was a evangelist and his wife that came to our church. He's deceased, Prophet Floyd Brown, and his wife, Sister Brown, and prophet of God, real prophet of God. And I never forget her looking at me, and I was like, why is she looking at me like that? And she came to me and she said, the Lord said, I see you with dual ministry. And I said, okay. She said, I see you evangelizing and I see you pastoring the church. I was like, okay. So I said, all right. Then I went to run a revival in Lake Placid, Florida, and their pastor, Major Callahan, he was on a 21-day fast, said to me, he said, you ready to pastor? I said, not really. He said, well, you're going to be pastoring the church real soon. And I laughed at him, and he can tell you, I laughed at him. And I said, Pastor, I tell you what, you have missed God to the extent that you probably need to go back in the closet and pray, because I know that can't be God, because God knows that's not even in my heart or even what I plan on doing. And so he gave me that and told me that, and I was like, okay, that's not going to happen. And so what happened was, it was so crazy. Bishop Patterson said to me about 2 weeks before I started pastoring, he said, you're going to end up getting to church. I was like, really? You think so? And so I was like, okay, all right. And so they were having a 3-night prayer revival in Columbus, Georgia at Superintendent Rogers Church. And we were out eating. And we were at Red Lobster eating, matter of fact. And some came on me so strong. I mean, it was a strong urge. And I told him I got to go. I got to make it to this revival. I didn't even know where the church was. I went past where I was supposed to have been, and I ended up stopping a couple of places to get just to find out what the address was. When I got there, they were on the altar doing altar services and everything. And when we came back, I did not know that Bishop Owens was getting ready to appoint or look for somebody to pastor this church. And when I came in, and when I spoke to him at the end, he said, what you think about Martin here for that church? And my bishop now, Bishop Harper, was driving him. And he said, oh, he'll be a good person to do it. And I want to tell you that he said, I need you to meet me Tuesday, whatever it was, about a week or so it was. And he ended up appointing me to the church, and that I've been at some 20 some years now. But what I'm saying to you, it was timing. The urge that came upon me to go there was the timing of God, because I wasn't even the one that they were looking at to pastor the church. But because I showed up and because God put it in my spirit to go, timing. So I want to say to you, timing means everything. When you're talking about what's next or it didn't work, understand the timing of God is very important. And not only the timing of God, but understand the will of God is important. It's important to be in the will of God, the will of God. The will of God is important. And so I want to stress those things, that doing the will of God, being in the will of God, it's so important to be in the will of God. The song that Bishop White sung years ago, the safest place in the whole wide world is in the will of God. It's in the will of God. I don't care how much people offer you what they say you need to do, what you need to do, this, that, and the other. If it's not in God's will, I don't want to do anything that's not in the will of God, because sometimes the safest place in the will of God is in the will of God, and sometimes the roughest place can be in the will of God. And you've got to know, if you don't know anything else, before you go through the changes, you got to tell yourself, I'm in the will of God. And if I'm in the will of God, Joseph was in the will of God. Even though he was put in the pit, he was in the will of God. Even though he's down into Potiphar's house, even though he ended up in prison, he was in the will of God. The butler and the baker interpreted the dreams. He was in the will of God. And God brought him to a place that eventually he saved his whole family, the whole city. Why? Because he was in the will of God. And he says, don't go through no changes. I know you meant it unto me for evil, but God meant it unto me for good. In other words, I'm in the will of God. I'm in his perfect will. I know where I am. And that's what you've got to know. You've got to know that you're in the will of God. When you get to the what's next, and when you think it's not working, just understand that if you're in the will of God, it's working. The will of God may not always put you on a major platform. You know, people get hung up on that. So I know this is the Lord's will. What if it's the Lord's will for you to be ministering where you are and people are still being saved and delivered, and that's the will of God for your life? If it is, enjoy his will. Enjoy his will, because at the end of the day, he's not going to reward you for something that he didn't tell you to do. No, well done, my good and faithful servant. He will reward you for the things he's put in your spirit to do. I'm closing. Number 3 on this number 5 is know God said it, and then just stick with it. If you know God said it, if you know God told you to do it, stick with it. Don't allow yourself to get to the place that you give up and quit. Don't allow yourself to quit ministry. Don't allow yourself to quit the work of the Lord. Allow yourself to stay and stick with it. Sometimes you got to stick with something, and you've got to stay with something and tell yourself that I'm staying with it. I'm sticking with it. I can't do anything different. I have to stay with what God has told me to do. And sometimes what you're doing may seem like it's not working, but I'm here to assure you that that scripture is not in the Bible just to be there for us to preach and shout and dance and get excited about. It's there for a purpose. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to, and here's the key word, his purpose. Not our purpose, his purpose. If we are called according to his purpose, all things are working together for good because we are called according to his purpose. The Lord bless you and the Lord keep you. I'm so excited about this teaching tonight, and I pray that you have gotten something from it. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you, and I want to hear from you this week. Many of you, like I said, I've got emails. My email address is rrcdmartin@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, dlmartin.org. You can watch this over there. And I would love to hear from you. Would love to correspond with you. We're getting ready to start some mentoring sessions that we're going to be talking, and they'll be one-on-one, and some of them we're going to be able to talk with you in detail and answer some questions that you may have and be a blessing to those. And so I want you to be looking out for that. Matter of fact, if you want to get a heads up on that, go to dlmartin.org, click on where it says text notifications, fill that information out, because I would love to hear from you and love to get that information to you. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I pray and trust that it has blessed you. I pray and trust that you receive something from this tonight. Please share it with someone. Now, next Wednesday, we won't be here because we'll be in our convocation that starts on Tuesday. And our guest next Wednesday is Evangelist Dorinda Clark Cole. She's going to be ministering on next Tuesday. Those of you in here, Georgia, if you're in Georgia, come to Kelly Lake, 2411 Whites Mill Road in Decatur, Georgia. Bishop Norman Harper would love to see you. We'll be in convocation, but the following Wednesday, we'll be back dealing with Let's Talk Ministry. And then those of you can go, and also on my website, we've got some podcasts. You can listen at those. We'll be doing some more, and I know it'll be a blessing to you. So the Lord bless you, and the Lord keep you is my prayer. Thank you again for joining me, and we look forward to seeing you week after next.